In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Chosen one, this message didn't find you by accident. God led you here. Heaven orchestrated this moment to remind you not of what you've lost, not of what you've been through, but of how deeply pleased the Most High is with your heart, your endurance, and your obedience. You've been wondering if your sacrifices mattered. You've been walking through storms with no applause, showing kindness without recognition, and remaining faithful while feeling invisible. But here's the truth. Heaven has been watching, and right now a reward is forming around your name because of something. Most people missed something hidden, something divine. Let's go deeper. 7 powerful revelations are about to confirm exactly why heaven is smiling on you right now. Before we go any further, chosen one, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, because this isn't just another video. This is a divine confirmation. This is heaven's way of letting you know you've been seen, you've been tested, and you're about to be rewarded. If your spirit is resonating with this message already, type 77 in the comments right now. That number isn't random. It's a spiritual code assigned to the Most High, that you're aligned, awakened, and ready to receive what's been stored up for you from the beginning. This message isn't for everyone. Only the truly chosen will feel this in their bones. And those who stay until the end will receive clarity, spiritual confirmation, and divine insight into why heaven is smiling on you right now, even when others don't understand what you carry. Don't treat this like something you hear once and forget. This message is living, it's layered, it's prophetic. Revisit it as often as your spirit leads, because with each listen, heaven will unlock another piece of the puzzle, another glimpse into your purpose, another key to your elevation. Let's dive in. Let the Spirit speak to you, chosen one, because now you're about to find out why heaven is so pleased with you. Chapter 1. You stayed pure when you had every excuse not to. Chosen one in a generation where compromise is the culture and shortcuts are celebrated. You chose the narrow road. You had opportunities, not just once, but many times, to take the easy way out, to join the crowd, to bend your truth just enough to fit into places that seemed promising, but something in your spirit resisted. Something in you remembered who you were, even when it would have been more convenient to forget. You didn't just say no to sin, you said yes to your soul. You protected your purity, and not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You refused to lie to yourself. You refused to betray your values just to feel accepted. And while others laughed, called you too deep, too sensitive, or too serious, you kept your eyes on God. You chose character over clout, integrity over influence, purity over popularity. You chose to be right with God over being liked by man. That kind of decision cost something, and heaven saw the price you paid. The nights you felt alone, the invitations you declined, the relationships you walked away from, the jobs you lost, the opportunities you watched pass you by because you wouldn't compromise your calling. Heaven kept the receipts. You didn't just stay clean, you stayed consecrated, set apart. And though it seemed quiet on the outside, in the spirit realm, your decision echoed loudly. Angels took note. Heaven recorded your resistance. And now the reward that's coming to you is not just because of what you did, but because of what you refused to do. You didn't chase platforms, you chased presence. While others were using manipulation to climb ladders, you were letting God build your foundation. And it was in that secret place, the place where no one clapped, where no one validated you, that heaven smiled and said, This one can be trusted. This is why you're about to be elevated. Not because you were flashy, not because you had the best branding, but because you were faithful. You chose obedience over opportunity. You chose righteousness when rebellion was more popular. And now you don't have to beg to be blessed, because heaven already wrote your name on the scroll of divine reward. What? You didn't compromise to get, you won't have to strive to keep what you protected in private, God is about to honor in public. And the best part, you didn't do it for the blessing. You did it for the relationship. You did it because you truly love God. You did it because your soul wouldn't let you settle for less than what heaven ordained you. Pass the test. You stayed clean in a culture that celebrates corruption, and for that heaven is pleased not just with what you've done, but with who you've become. Chapter 2, you loved when it was easier to hate. Chosen one, let's be honest. You didn't just go through betrayal, you lived through it. You loved people who turned their backs on you. You gave your loyalty to those who only used you. You showed up with a full heart and left with it shattered. And if you had turned cold, no one would have blamed you. If you had hardened your heart, built a wall and stopped trusting people altogether, the world would have called it growth. But heaven calls what you did holy. You chose love, not because it was easy, but because it was divine. When you had every right to hate, you prayed instead. When you could have lashed out, you remained silent. When people threw stones, you responded with grace. And that response didn't come from weakness, it came from wisdom. It came from a place of spiritual maturity that said, even if they don't honor me, I still honor God. You didn't just survive betrayal, you outgrew it. You didn't carry bitterness, you carried lessons. You didn't retaliate, you released. You chose forgiveness not because they deserved it, but because your soul did. You chose healing even while you were still bleeding. That kind of love is rare. That kind of love comes from heaven, and that's exactly what separates the chosen from the crowd. You didn't let pain poison your purpose. You didn't let it make you toxic. You let it strip away the ego, the pride, the urge to prove your point or get revenge. You allowed the fire to burn, but instead of consuming you, it refined you. Instead of making you hard, it made you holy. It made you humble. It made you whole, and heaven took note of that. The hidden reason God is so pleased with you isn't just because you endured. It's because you endured with your heart intact. You didn't let the fire burn away your kindness. You let it burn away everything that didn't serve your calling. And because of that, God can trust you now on a higher level. You didn't walk around preaching love, you became it. You didn't just talk about forgiveness, you embodied it. Even when it cost you relationships, even when it made you feel like a fool, even when people said you were too soft, too spiritual, too kind, you still chose love because that's who you are at your core. You understand that vengeance belongs to God. You understand that love is more powerful than hate. And you live like someone who's been in God's presence, because only someone who's been close to God can love the way you have. You don't love out of emotion, you love from a place of revelation. You know that loving your enemies doesn't make you weak, it proves that you're spiritually awake. And that chosen one is why heaven is honoring you in this season. Your love is not a liability, it's your greatest legacy. You'll never know how many people were changed just by how you chose not to retaliate. How many people saw Christ through your calmness. How many battles were won in the spirit because you refused to fight in the flesh. You loved when it was easier to hate. You loved when no one was watching. You loved when your name was being dragged. You loved when your heart was breaking. And that love, that sacred, stubborn, spirit-filled love, is what's qualifying you for your next level. Heaven sees it, heaven honors it, and heaven is moving because of it, because in a world that celebrates revenge, you chose redemption. And that chosen one is why your next season will be full of supernatural favor. Chapter 3, you passed the tests you never knew you were taking. Chosen one, the hardest tests aren't the ones you prepare for. They're the ones you never saw coming. And your life has been full of them. Some of your greatest trials didn't come with warning signs. It didn't come with instructions. They came in the form of betrayal, disappointment, silence, and situations that tested the posture of your soul. You didn't even realize you were being examined, but you were. By heaven, quietly, carefully, completely. There were moments when you could have responded in rage, but you chose restraint. Moments when you were deeply hurt and still extended kindness. Days when you showed up broken, unseen and exhausted, and still poured into others. Times when you could have justified giving up, but you didn't. You kept going. And the truth is, nobody applauded you for it. There were no trophies, no titles, no spotlight. In fact, the tests you endured were so private that most people didn't even realize how close you were to breaking, but God did. He saw the spiritual weight you were carrying while smiling through your pain. He saw the temptation you resisted, even when no one would have known. He saw the conversations you didn't engage in, the revenge you didn't take, the bitterness you refused to let grow in your heart. And while people were watching for performance, heaven was watching for purity. These were divine evaluations, not of your outer appearance, but of your inner condition, your patience, your loyalty, your humility, your trust. And even when you were confused, even when you didn't understand why things were happening the way they were, you stayed surrendered. You kept showing up with clean hands and a soft heart. You passed the test, not because you were strong every day, but because you were faithful every day. That's what pleased heaven. You didn't fake your strength. You leaned on God's. You didn't pretend to have it all together. You kept your posture low and your spirit open. And those secret decisions to remain honest, holy, and humble, they didn't go unnoticed. You weren't seeking recognition. You weren't doing good so someone would validate you. You were doing it because your spirit refused to betray your calling. You stayed in alignment with God. When it would have been easier to run, you stayed in position. When it would have felt better to prove your point, you didn't flinch. When the pressure hit, and even when you felt weak, you didn't fold. And now the reward that's coming won't just be big, it will be divine. It will be proportionate to the weight you carried, the discipline you kept, and the integrity you held on to when no one else could see. Because here's the truth, heaven doesn't promote based on popularity, it promotes based on private victory. And that's what you've been stacking quietly, consistently, faithfully. You passed the kind of tests that heaven counts most. Tests of attitude when no one was watching. Tests of obedience when no one was affirming. Tests of trust when everything in your life felt uncertain. These weren't just trials, they were thresholds, and you crossed them without even realizing it. So now public favor is about to find you, but it won't be random, it won't be luck, it won't be coincidence. It'll be the harvest from the seeds you sweat in the dark, the blessings tied to the battles. You never told anyone about the reward of the hidden yeses you gave God when everything in your flesh screamed no. Chapter 4, you listened when God whispered, chosen one. Obedience in clarity is one thing, but obedience in confusion, that's a whole different realm. And that's where you've been walking. God didn't always give you the full map. He didn't always explain why He closed that door, delayed that promise, or asked you to release something that felt good, you listened anyway. You didn't wait for the thunder, you responded to the whisper when God nudged your heart. You moved when He pulled your spirit away from certain people or environments. You followed even when it hurt. You didn't argue with the instruction just because it didn't make sense to your logic. You leaned in quietly, humbly, faithfully. You followed the still small voice that others ignored. That kind of obedience is rare. That kind of listening, that kind of sensitivity to divine frequency is not something taught. It's something gifted, and you honored that gift. You tuned your ears to the realm of the Spirit while others were distracted by noise. You silenced your surroundings just to hear what God was whispering. While the world chased trends, hype, and opinions, you kept your heart positioned to hear divine direction. And that posture, that decision to respond without fanfare is why heaven is pleased with you sometimes. The whisper didn't even come with full instructions, just one word, just a feeling, just a conviction. And you didn't wait for full understanding. You just obeyed. That's what heaven celebrates. You let go of friendships that felt familiar. You left environments that were once comfortable. You walked away from things that looked like blessings, but your spirit knew otherwise. You took leaps when no one cheered. You stayed still when everything around you was shouting go. You obeyed, not because you saw, but because you should believed to obedience. Like that takes faith, real faith, because it often costs everything you thought you needed. It makes you look foolish. It makes you misunderstood. People questioned you. Some even walked away. But you didn't shift your ear to match their expectations. You kept it tuned to heaven. And now the hidden reason you're about to walk into supernatural favor is this: you let God lead even when it didn't make sense. You let Him order your steps even when the ground felt shaky. You trusted His whisper over the world's volume. Heaven rewards that kind of trust. Not surface level convenient obedience, but deep, radical, surrendered listening. The kind of obedience that says, God, even if it costs me everything, I still choose you. While others needed confirmation from crowds, you moved on conviction. While others hesitated, you advanced. You walked when you didn't have clarity. You believed when you didn't have proof. Chapter 5, you kept building when it looked pointless. Chosen one, let's be honest. It would have made sense to stop. You had every reason to walk away. The support wasn't there. The results were invisible. The numbers didn't reflect the weight of your effort. You weren't being celebrated. You weren't going viral. You were building something in silence. And for a long time, it felt like you were doing it for nothing. But you kept going. You kept showing up when you felt tired. Kept creating when you felt unseen. Kept serving when your heart felt empty. Kept giving when you were barely receiving. And that kind of faith, that kind of spiritual endurance, heaven never overlooks that. Every time you chose consistency over comfort, God was watching. Every time you planted seeds in dry ground, heaven was recording. You were moving by obedience, not outcome. You were working by conviction, not by applause. And even though it felt like you were getting nowhere, you were actually being positioned for something greater than you could see. You weren't just working, you were worshiping through your work. You weren't just creating, you were prophesying through your consistency. You weren't just writing or building or speaking. You were laying down spiritual bricks for a vision God gave you that no one else could understand. Others stopped when they didn't see results, but you kept building. Others needed validation, but you moved from revelation. Others chased platforms, but you stayed faithful to the process. And because of that, your reward is not only coming, it's already being released, you see. Chosen one. You were never just building a project. You were building obedience. You were proving to heaven that you could be trusted with vision, even in obscurity. That you wouldn't let numbers define your value. That you wouldn't let results dictate your identity. That you wouldn't let discouragement rob you of your discipline. That's why your season is shifting. Heaven is pleased. Not because you were perfect, but because you were persistent. You didn't abandon the assignment. You didn't throw away the blueprint. You kept writing, kept preaching, kept designing, kept praying, kept working the thing God placed in your heart, even when everyone else stopped looking. What you were doing in private wasn't pointless. It was prophetic. What you were building in the dark wasn't failure, it was foundation. And now the same thing you stayed faithful to when no one cared is the very thing God is about to breathe on publicly. Your harvest is not delayed. It's been growing underground. Soon it's going to break through in ways even you didn't expect. So let this be your reminder. Every silent sacrifice was seen. Every unnoticed effort was recorded. Every unseen seed is about to bear fruit, because heaven isn't pleased with hype. Heaven is pleased with honor, and you honored the assignment when no one was watching. That's why the reward coming to you won't just bless you, it'll validate everything you built. When it looked like nothing was working, you didn't give up. And that alone is proof that you were chosen. Chapter 6. You let God heal you before you try to lead others. Chosen one. In a world where everyone wants to teach, lead, and influence, you made a different choice. A sacred one. You chose to sit with God before trying to stand before others. You chose to weep before trying to speak. You chose to be humbled, healed, and whole before trying to hold up others. And that right there is why heaven is pleased with you. You weren't chasing position, you were chasing purity. You didn't rush to be a voice, you waited to become a vessel. And instead of offering broken wisdom through a wounded lens, you chose to surrender yourself to the process of deep healing. You allowed God to go into the locked places of your soul. You let Him into the pain. You never talked about the trauma you didn't know was still affecting you. The patterns that were shaping your identity in silence. That kind of inner work isn't glamorous, but it's glorious in heaven's eyes. You allowed God to detox your motives. You let Him cleanse your heart before you picked up a mic or stepped into purpose. You allowed yourself to bleed in His presence, not on His people. You understood that helping others without healing first can become harm dressed up as ministry. You didn't want to lead from ego, you wanted to lead from encounter. While many wanted platforms, you pursued presence. While many tried to go viral, you chose to go vertical, deeper into God. You let Him strip away the false identities, the pride, the performance mentality, the desire to impress. And you asked Him to make you real, to make you whole, to make you right before Him. First, heaven is pleased because you didn't try to bypass the breaking. You didn't try to preach around your pain. You didn't pretend to have it all together. You brought your brokenness to the altar. You allowed God to correct you, cut you, refine you, and then cover you, so that what flows out of you would be pure. And now because of that private obedience, public power is being released because you let Him heal you first. Your words now carry weight because you let Him refine your heart. Your influence will carry integrity because you stayed on the potter's wheel. Heaven can now trust you. With people, you're not leading from wounds anymore. You're leading from wisdom. You're not trying to fix others to avoid fixing yourself. You let God deal with you first. And that kind of leadership, that kind of foundation, that's what shakes atmospheres and unlocks revival. Chosen one, heaven is proud of you. Not because you've been perfect, but because you've been honest. You didn't fake it, you didn't mask it, you didn't skip steps to arrive faster. You let God walk you through the valley. You let Him touch the parts of your soul that religion avoids. And because you did, you carry something deeper than information. You carry transformation. You're not just a voice, you're a vessel. You're not just influential, you're anointed. And this next season of your life, it's not just about your healing anymore. It's about helping to heal others, because you didn't just get restored, you got recommissioned. You were healed to help, you were broken to bless, you were crushed to carry compassion, and you were emptied so heaven could fill you with glory. Now God can use you without limit, because you let Him heal you without resistance. Chapter 7, you became who God created, not who the world expected. Chosen one, this is one of the most sacred decisions you've ever made, to become who God created, not who the world tried to mold you into. You stopped shrinking yourself to fit their boxes. You stopped editing your truth to keep the peace. You stopped silencing your gift just to avoid being misunderstood. You realized that the pressure to perform was never from God, it was from the world. The labels, the expectations, the projections others placed on you, you carried them for too long. But somewhere in the journey, through pain and prayer, through isolation and revelation, you broke free. And that's why heaven is pleased with you. You stopped chasing what was safe and started surrendering to what was sacred. You stopped asking people for permission to be yourself, and started walking boldly in the identity God whispered into your spirit. Before the foundation of the world, you let go of the need to be palatable. You released the fear of being too much. You abandoned the watered down version of your voice just to make others feel comfortable. You broke generational patterns. You stepped out of cultural limitations. You refused to become a copy of what everyone else applauded, and chose to become a reflection of what heaven had already approved. Chosen one, this is rare. Most people never reach this place. Most people stay hidden behind masks, tied to false identities, bound by opinions, living for applause, while dying inside. But not you. You were willing to be misunderstood, isolated, rejected, just to be authentic. You didn't just find your purpose, you surrendered to it. You didn't just talk about alignment, you walked into it. You didn't just repeat what others said, you tapped into your own divine frequency. And now everything in heaven is aligning in your favor. You stopped chasing platforms and heaven gave you power. You stopped needing followers and heaven gave you favor. You stopped needing to be liked, and God lit a fire in you that no one can dim. You became light in a world full of illusion. You became a voice in a world echoing noise. You became truth in a world drowning in performance. And now the atmosphere recognizes you. Angels respond to your movement. Doors open at the sound of your obedience, because you're no longer wearing the costume you're wearing. You're calling Nash. This is why you're about to rise, not because you manipulated your way up, not because you built a brand, not because you bent your identity to be accepted, but because you became exactly who God always intended you to be, without apology, without dilution, without delay. You've become the version of you that hell feared, and heaven always knew was coming. So yes, favor is falling, breakthrough is arriving, elevation is unfolding, because when you become the true you, the one God formed in secret, you activate a level of grace, access and protection that the world can't explain or stop. You've become everything they said you wouldn't, and exactly who God always knew you were.